Hi, sixth grade. I first want to say how impressed I am with you guys for the way you've handled cyber school so far. Great job. Most of you are getting your assignments turned in time, did very well on the test. Please make sure that you are keeping up with your due dates on your assignments. Like I've said several times, I cannot accept late work simply because since I'm not in front of you, I have to give you the answers the day after it is due. So they really have to be on time or you're getting a 0 for that assignment. But most of you have been doing that, so great job. We're gonna do next week the same way we did this week. I'm gonna do a preview right now. You're gonna have the guided reading, the activities. We're gonna probably just do some studying tools on mostly on Wednesday and Thursday, and then the test will be on Friday. So, okay, we're gonna jump into chapter 15. This chapter is titled Hope and Faithfulness, and really that's what it's about. It's about having hope and faith in God, even during times when it would be very easy to fall into hopelessness. Times when everything is kind of going wrong and maybe you don't feel happy or hopeful or loved, to still have that faith that God will pull you through. As you recall from our last chapter, the Israelites have been exiled by the Assyrians. They're devastated. No doubt they're feeling hopeless, but instead of giving into that, they find their faith again and they have hope that God will help them get through this terrible time. So think about that. I mean, how many times have we felt exiled? I mean, maybe not necessarily taken out of our homeland, although we kind of feel that way right now, right? Very much so exiled from everyone else. But you know, maybe we're exiled from our friends, or maybe we lost a loved one and we feel kind of exiled. And it's these times where oftentimes there's a person or a group of people who kind of pull you through that. So for the Israelites, this person was Ezekiel. You're going to learn a lot about Ezekiel in this chapter. But first, I think it's important that I give you just the slightest tiny bit of a history lesson, because you see the book jumps from the Assyrian exile to the Babylonian exile and really doesn't give much of an explanation as to how we got there. And I know with my little brainiac sixth graders, you're not going to accept that. You're going to want to know, why we're jumping from one to the other. So I thought I would just give you just a little tiny bit of a lesson on how this happened. So if you recall from chapters ago, Solomon was a great king, right? But then he dies and his son Rehoboam takes over. So not so great, right? He's ignoring the advice of the elders and really just doing whatever he wants. He's not putting his people first. So some of the people in Israel decide they don't want this anymore. So Israel splits into 2 kingdoms. And I have this map to kind of show you, and I'm going to put this on Classroom so that you have it. But the top part, or the northern part of Israel, remains Israel, but then it breaks into the kingdom of Judah at the bottom. So the green up there is Israel, and the orange is Judah. Hopefully you can see this, but like I said, I'm going to put that on Classroom so that you can see it a little bit better. So now back to the Assyrian exile that we talked about in the last chapter. What happened was Assyria, as you recall, this whole lesson is about how we're not following God's covenant. They're doing whatever they want. They're not praying. They become complacent, and they've broken their covenant with God. So because of this, God allows this to happen. He allows the Assyrians to come from the north and invade Israel, the green part at the top. And when they did, they kind of took out a lot of the Israelites and exiled them from their homeland, right? Well, at the time, Judah was still following God's covenant. So Assyria does not travel down to Judah. Judah remains safe and, with no problems, but Israel is kind of torn apart. Like, not only have they taken a lot of the Israelites out of Israel, but they've implanted other people, other cultures, people who are worshiping false gods into Israel, right? Well, unfortunately, Judah doesn't stay that way for long, because around 587, I believe it is, BC, the Babylonians come from around over here and they invade Judah. And now they have done the same thing. They actually come in 3 waves and they start plucking Jews out of Judah, and they put them into exile as well, right? So remember, all about the fact that God has allowed this to happen as they break their covenants, right? So keep in mind, Assyrians, Israel, Babylonians, Judah. Okay. The real big problem that you're going to read about is not only did the Babylonians go into Judah and exile a lot of their people, but they destroyed the temple. So they are devastated, right? They are in exile and they can't seem to find a way to even pray. So along come these prophets, just like Ezekiel, who teaches them that it doesn't matter where they are. They were becoming too reliant upon the temple. But he says to them, it doesn't matter if you have a temple. As long as you have God in your heart, you still can pray and you still can be devoted to God. Ezekiel has a great vision that you're going to read about called Dry Bones, where he has a vision of a pile of dry bones, and he teaches the people that God puts flesh on the bones and breathes life into the bones, just like God allows his people to go back to Israel and back to Judah and rebuild their temple. So you're also going to read the story of the book of Ruth. We're still in the Old Testament right now. It can be very factual. It can be complicated. But like I said from the beginning of the year, it has some great stories. So this is the story of Slingshot Dave's mom. Remember Slingshot Dave, David who defeated Goliath, the great king of Israel. So the story begins with Naomi, who moves from Bethlehem to Judah with her husband and her 2 sons. Remember, moving wasn't exactly easy back then. There were no like Holiday Inn Express that you could, rest in, or moving companies. Okay, it was very, very hard. So they get there to Judah, and unfortunately, her husband dies. Well, first her 2 sons marry. They marry Orpah and Ruth. Right, Ruth is the one that we're really talking about. But unfortunately, at that point, her husband dies. Naomi's husband dies, and her 2 sons die. So it's her and her 2 daughters, daughter-in-law actually, and they decide they're going to move back to Bethlehem. So they get back to Bethlehem, and Naomi says to her 2 daughters or daughters-in-law that they should just go back to the house of their mother and they should remarry. So the one does, but Ruth does not. Ruth knows that if she leaves Naomi, she's going to die. She's going to be alone and she's going to die. She will not survive. So Ruth stays with her. She shows her compassion. She shows her love and stays with her. And they're desolate. They're starving. And they go to a field where there are leftover abandoned pieces of grain. And Ruth is collecting these things so that they can eat. And the field owner comes up to Ruth and tells her that he knows what she's done and that she stayed with her mother-in-law and that he hopes God bestows great favor on her. He ultimately falls in love with her, and they become the parents of the great King David. Okay. One other thing that you're going to read about in this chapter are the precepts of the church. Basically, they are our obligations, like going to Mass is a precept of the church, although honestly, we can't go right now. And you're going to read about the theological and the moral virtues. Now, we're going to cover the virtues in a lot more detail next year, but this year, just keep in mind that these are kind of like the pathways to everlasting life. They're like a roadmap on how to get closer to God. Okay, so at this point, you're going to read and highlight your chapter, do your guided reading, make sure you turn it in on time. I am going to be open. As you know, anybody who has emailed me, I'm pretty quick with emailing back. So if you have any questions, the chapter isn't that complicated, but if you have any questions about our little history lesson or anything, please feel free to email me at any time. I will make sure I get back to you. But I'm also going to open up office hours this week. I believe the office hours for 6th grade are Tuesday. I know it's from 10 to 10:30. I will send you a notice in Classroom once that gets finalized, which day it is. And basically what that means is I'm going to send you a link. It's probably going to be a Google Meet link, and you can kind of jump in and ask any questions that you have, any concerns that you have, and it'll be more face-to-face as we can get right now. Okay, but in the meantime, if you have any questions, please let me know, and have a great week. I hope everyone's nice and healthy, and happy reading.